Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Carpets and Coffee, the reptile podcast that is literally made up on the spot with very little to no agenda.
But a lot of coffee.
And a lot of coffee to stimulate spontaneity. Before we get into any of our usual shenanigans, first of all, Eric is not feeling 100%, so he's taking a rest at home. His asthma is affected by the cold weather, as is probably a lot of people. I know I have, challenges with that. So you all are getting the intern special today. Another dose of double trouble, dum diddy dum dum, I guess.
No. It's smart and smarter. We
Smart
don't do
and
dumb
smarter,
here.
coffee and coffeeer. And then we did want to definitely lead off by reminding everyone to go become a member of USARC in some form or fashion. The lowest tier is $5 a month. You can even go up further than that. There's a lot of legislation going on around the country right now: South Carolina, Florida, Illinois, and more, New York. Yeah. All about somehow restricting your rights to keep and or transport reptiles legally. And so they're the only organization that's out there really fighting and paying attention to everything that's going on everywhere to protect those rights. And they are a nonprofit. So the more money we can send their way to, keep them going is beneficial. And there's been a lot of stuff going on lately that's brought more attention to that, not just the legislation, but people in need of help with all the weather and fundraising from different avenues to help these folks that have been without power and lost animals. And is that, if you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard, several states, Texas and a few others, to name just, one of the major ones, have been hit ridiculously hard. Yeah. With insanely cold, unusually cold weather and rolling blackouts, no power, and even
water in some cases.
Yeah, for weeks. And some of these folks are prepared with double generators, like backups on backups. And when things get that cold and things freeze, it doesn't matter how prepared you are. So exactly. I can't even imagine. Yeah. and then with animals that need it warm, I can't even imagine the loss that everyone's gone through. So there's a Reptile Relief Fund 101 on Facebook. There's, just donating to USARC. There's a lot people can do. So
absolutely. I mean, my heart goes out to all the people in Texas that have had to, make tough calls and watch, their collections and the animals they love, and not make it in some cases. That's absolutely horrifying. And, kind of the nightmare situation for what we do. And in regards to USARC, absolutely, it's such a critical moment right now for the community to put a good foot forward and make sure that we support the people that are fighting for us. Like you said, they really are the only one doing so. And with a lot of this stuff, it's a lot easier for the other interests to take it away than it would ever be for us to get it back. Once that goes, it's a lot harder to push the boulder back uphill and get that kind of stuff back. So we really do want to support the people that are doing the work on the ground, talking to the politicians and going to court and whatnot, to keep our ability to keep, if you will. Really important right now, and definitely not a good time to ostrich your head in the sand about these kinds of issues, especially with COVID and everybody, having an increased awareness of exotic animals and kind of the new stigma around exotics, that term, and people thinking that they're going to bring diseases, even if they were born in my house in Oakland. It's like people aren't, you can't expect the public to understand exactly what we do. And that's why we have to be positive and open to educating and, make good impressions right now, for sure.
Yeah. So, that's an a really good point to make. If anybody is into making content, even if it's just sharing photographs on Instagram, in the description you can write something positive about the snake or whatever. You can make a decent impact on the folks around you just by being a good steward for these animals and kind of, you know, helping just be honest and genuine. And if like people ask or, you know, say, oh, that's disgusting, or have really foul opinions, you can really make a difference and change some of these opinions, and just have a lasting effect. And it all kind of collectively adds to changing the misconceptions towards these animals, which ultimately can trickle into, you know, legislation. A lot of the common folks don't follow, you know, these things that we do, don't pay attention to the animals like we do. So it's up to us to kind of get the good information out there, and anybody with a voice that's doing anything in any big way, you know, that's where your focus could really be most impactful right now. You know, nothing negative, no ranting, none of that. So
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know those people in our lives that were, you know, the only good snake's a dead snake until you actually show them the snake. And, you know, that's one of my absolute favorite things about keeping is watching that light bulb go off for people.
Yeah.
And within like 10 minutes, you know, they're like, oh, I want to hold it now. Like, these are pretty cool. You know, that is a really powerful avenue that we have, you know, that we got to keep in mind for sure with all the content, because it is COVID. So,
yeah,
you know, it's all virtual at this point, but all the content, you know, we should really be focusing on the good.
And then the other side of that is being sensitive to the people who aren't involved in reptiles and understanding that you're not going to convince everyone, and that's okay. It's their right to not like reptiles or not want to see, you know, graphic things like feeding or I don't know, just anything. You know, we're so normalized to some of these things that might seem extreme to people outside of it. We don't necessarily realize the effect it can have in a public forum like YouTube or Instagram or movies, videos, whatever.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, the public has seen tarantulas and snakes as, you know, negative things in like Indiana Jones and all this stuff. So they see that more than they see us putting out the good positive stuff.
Yeah. Ish says here, maybe no live feeding vids right now, brings negative publicity.
Yeah. And I understand there's certain animals where it's really unique to see them feed, like egg eaters or snake feedings on other snakes or like big prey items. I can completely see the appeal to folks wanting to see that. But yeah, I've never been a fan of really wanting to share much of that. I've tried to avoid it almost entirely myself. I think I've showed some feeding with the Crebos, but like that's kind of it. Yeah, we just have to be really sensitive to everything that's going on out there. So yeah, Jennifer Strickland says the same thing. Live feeding is a good point. I have a policy: if you show live feeding on social media, automatically unfollow, not because I disagree with live feeding, but because of the negative perception. Yeah, perception is reality, and unfortunately, you know, as much as that seems like a crappy way to just, it almost could seem like accepting defeat. It's not. It's the reality of the situation that you can't change people, and what they see is how they see it, no matter what. So, you know, erring on the safe side when things are so volatile, like right now, is kind of the responsible way to go. You know, and if you want to do things that are maybe not so responsible, just don't do it on camera.
Sure.
That's all. So, but anyway, Lucas has been up early. I've been up early. I got up an hour before my alarm clock this morning. I'm not sure why. I really
How
don't know.
How early is that?
Well, on my days off, I don't like to sleep in past 7:30. You know, that's a good amount of sleep for me.
Gotcha.
So I was up at like 6 this morning just because, and so I've already like pulled rodents for some feeding. I've already done dishes, refilled the humidifier, cleaned snakes, checked on my inventory, done some editing, like all this good stuff. And that was all before coffee.
Incredible. Your productivity is admirable. I got up. All I did was walk the dog, walk to a bakery to get chocolate croissant for my fat ass, and came
that
back
sounds
here.
good.
Yeah,
I
it was
can't.
good.
I can't wait for COVID stuff to like completely stop impacting business hours and availability. Because right across the street at Vic's, in the back half, they have a coffee pastry shop thing that's really good stuff for breakfast.
Nice.
And now it's just not open, only on certain days. So
I have to walk a fair like distance to get to this bakery. Plus, like my apartment building's at the top of a hill, so I feel like by the time I get back, I've earned it. You know, it's built into to the process.
Sure. Yeah, it's all a system.
Yeah.
What was your bean of choice this morning? What was your cup of joe?
You know, I actually I ran out, so I was doing the blue bottle coffee, I think that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Ran out of beans, which was part of my decision to go to the bakery. So I just got whatever they were making there. I got a large coffee at the bakery.
Okay, like one of their house roasts or something.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what they're using, but definitely a dark roast. Definitely pretty strong.
Yeah, nice.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah. No,
How about you?
I'm still on that Pete's Coffee Major Dickinson's blend because I haven't had the time to go to any of the local. I do want to go to a local roasting shop or at least see if the Vic's place does a house blend because I would like to, promote a local business in any way that I can. Even if it just means like going and buying some of their beans, sending you some, sending Eric some, and just making sure it's okay that, we talk about it on the air. I don't even need them to like give it to me for free or like, no payments or anything. I feel like we can give back to a small business. So like if there's a time where we can go get some local beans somewhere and like promote a local business just by talking about them and, maybe the off chance somebody in your neighborhood, hears about it or something, they buy it, it could help. So
yeah, that'd be sweet.
That way we'll have some relevance in the first word of the name of this show. Or second word, coffee.
Have you had Verve from Santa Cruz?
I think I have, yes.
That's a good one too. We could send Eric some Verve.
Yeah, he would like that. One of the ones I've had most recently that I really enjoyed was a Kona Estate Reserve blend that a friend of mine got. She's part of a special coffee, like Hawaii unique food and thing club where they like send you things monthly, and they sent her a bag of these estate beans and she already had some. She knew I like coffee, so she gave that to me, and it was sweet and lighter than I'm used to getting, but it was so good. So good.
Are you a dark roast guy? You must. I
am.
Beats.
Yeah. I like dark. I like medium to dark. And the reason I'm okay with, the spectrum is because since I grind my own beans and then I brew it in the French press, I can control a little bit of how it's going to come out. Mm-hmm. So more flavorful or dilute or stronger or less strong. So I tend to like it with more bold flavor and some good kick to it. A good little jolt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it some jet fuel, sign me up.
This is reminding me when I was at UC Santa Cruz, I lived with a good friend of mine who is a PhD student, like a mechanical engineering PhD guy, right? So he's high strung. He's intense, but he had this coffee called Death Wish. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes, I have heard of that.
Dude, it's like the most caffeinated coffee you can buy. And he shared that with me, and I lost my freaking mind. Like I had already had normal coffee, and he was like, "Try this."
Oh yeah,
it was bad.
There's people out there that are just like mad scientists about it. They're like, "How can I make it stronger and darker and blacker?" And like, so there's a lot of like metal bands that are getting their own coffee beans. Like I think Behemoth makes their own coffee. It's cool. So.
Yeah, we talk about Owen Squirrel a lot. Death Wish turned me into the squirrel.
Yeah. Oh, man. Coffee's so good. Denton Gallagher asked if it's okay to feed Savannah monitors live crawfish. So when I think of feeding crawfish, whether live or not, I think of the Australian Mertens water monitors that are kind of crawfish and crustacean specialists, and they have an instinct for instantly ripping off the pinching arms and going for the meat. That being said, I don't think a savanna monitor has that instinct, being more of an insect specialist, kind of in the heart of Africa, not necessarily near where crawfish are. That being said, I don't see any harm in trying it, just to ensure that it, one, doesn't get loose in your cage, and two, he doesn't hurt himself, or it just goes uneaten. But I don't see why you couldn't try it. I would just, I don't know, an animal
rip
that's
the pinchers off before you offer.
yeah.
Perhaps.
And then the other thing that makes me curious is being somewhere where maybe crawfish wouldn't be a normal part of his diet. Is his digestive system capable of handling the exoskeleton in that quantity? I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
So with that being said, if you were to try it and he were to like it and take it, I wouldn't probably make it a regular thing. I would maybe make it a once in a lifetime enrichment food item, and just be mindful of how his bowel movements are afterwards. If you see him really stressing and having a tough time passing that exoskeleton, which he shouldn't, you know, I mean, you keep them hot, they can pretty much digest anything. So I would say give it a whirl. What do you think of feeding bugs to certain species of snakes? Yeah, I was just watching a video of a copperhead eating a cicada the other day. I've seen that video.
Really?
So, yeah, they do that. I've seen that plenty of times.
Yeah, and there's the green tree moths as well.
Yep, that's been documented. Heck, there's somebody locally to me who fed her king snake scrambled eggs.
Wow.
It ate it. So
classic king snake.
Yeah, right. There might be an exception to a rule when it involves a king snake.
Yeah.
I would say Candoya, give it a shot. I do know that they seem to be rather specialized in their food. So I know some people get a lot of them to eat like morning geckos or house geckos or little frogs. Depends on the species. I really don't have much experience with Candoya. I've worked with some in zoos, but never bred any and never had to deal with babies. So
yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I would think that it wouldn't hurt to offer. You know, bugs are pretty easy pickings for most predators out there.
Yeah, I mean, there would be two approaches, I would think. You know, hypothetically, one, you could try tongue feeding. If it doesn't take it, then that's one interpretation. Or you could leave it in there and then see if it hunts it later on or whatever, as long as it's not going to try and predate upon your snake and nibble on it or stress it out or something. I don't know. I would say it's worthy of experimentation for sure. In my opinion.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, all right. Did you want to jump into our kind of our first main thing that we were talking about, or did you want to meander around the other stuff first?
Oh,
welcome to the intern special, folks.
The intern special. There's many things to talk about. I do have my notes pulled up from that reading if you wanted to touch on that, but
yeah.
Hey, dealer's choice. Whatever you want to do.
Well, so we've got two tangents that we can go on and get those out of the way, or save those for later.
Maybe we should tangent first.
Oh, we're going to tangent first, everybody. We're going to tangent first. I like it. The wild card.
Yes. And of course, as always, anybody out there in the chat, if there's anything you want to hear about, let us know. Because otherwise we're just going to go. We got some stuff in mind.
So my first tangent is I got more lights, in case you couldn't tell that the backdrop behind me. I'm really, really stoked on them, and I wish I'd have done it sooner. I've just never really cared. I've always just used the ambient light through the windows, but this is so much nicer. Barring, you know, some modifications to get them, you know, a little bit more secure in there. I'm now very, very pleased to have lights in there, especially the top cage. It's all the way up there, makes it a lot easier to see, and the bottom one too. So
it's so much nicer, right? Just in terms of like actually just being in there and observing the
right.
animal, it's great. And then
Hmm.
when you're cleaning, you can actually like see.
Yeah, you can see just how much I've neglected to clean over the winter. It's awesome. I was
Now,
so self-conscious. I cleaned all of the glass yesterday.
nice,
Yeah.
nice.
But
Are those strips, adhesive strip-ons, or
they're not adhesive. They're the so if you go on Amazon and look up, I'm gonna butcher the name. I sent it to Owen yesterday. There's a couple varieties on there. Obviously, if you go look up, LED strip lights, there's plenty. But these ones in particular, where am I? They are the Kihung. That's Kihung T5 LED tube light fixture. 4 feet. Each one's 20 watts, 4,000 Kelvin cool white light strips, and there's 8 packs and 12 packs. The 8 pack is like $50. The 12 packs is like $64.
nice?
And these are 4-foot cages, and those lights are 46 inches, so they just fit in. I just drilled some holes
Perfect.
and threaded it. So basically, like they link through like a serpentine system because the lights can all connect to themselves. So it's just one switch, or you can
That's
do it
awesome.
individually. So each light is its own switch if you want. I'm a huge fan. I'm gonna be curious to see if the animals spend more time like going in and out of their hides, see if there's more activity as a result of it, because otherwise, if they don't change any behavior, I won't be surprised either. But it's
And
novel.
have you noticed? Do those particular lights give off any heat, or are they
Nope.
nice? Okay, yeah. I snagged another cage to quarantine the blackhead, and I had them put in another UV light,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been slowly adding those, but they were out of the I think 8-inch one, so they put in like
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
jumbo one, and I had it on yesterday, and it was just too hot. Like that light was giving
Mm.
off quite a bit of heat, which was unfortunate.
Was
The
it
entire
LED or
cage,
just a T5 bulb?
just T5 bulb,
Mm.
but just a really big one, and that entire cage was at about 84, and I was like, nope,
Gotta go.
can't do that.
You
So
gotta go.
yeah, I got to get a smaller one, unfortunately.
Well,
But
get LEDs. So
yeah,
LEDs are much less prone to putting out light unless you have multiple strips of them. Then the whole unit itself can generate some heat. But
for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
the 2 6-foot cages I have on order are going to have the LEDs.
nice.
So that'll be cool. But yeah, it's interesting. You hear the people these days talking about UV for snakes, and I have certainly seen some cool results from providing it for my falsie. But I guess one thing that folks don't tend to talk about is how that influences your temperature environment. And maybe I'm just using the wrong stuff, but yeah, it really heated up the cage for me there.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with some of those T5 strip lights, and when you get into the big ones, they can get warm for sure.
Yeah,
Um, So it's definitely mindful or something to be mindful of. And then Chris Sexton brings up a good point about when you're drilling the holes, make sure not to make them too large for your cables and lights so you don't make it escape accessible. So fortunately, these cables, they're like a 3-prong system where I took like a half-inch drill bit, just drilled a hole and then kind of shimmied it around in a circle to widen it, and just was able to snug them through. So I don't even think a baby carpet, if there were ever to be a baby carpet in here, could get out. But they're only for my adult cages, so they cannot do anything about that, fortunately. But yeah, definitely measure twice, cut once.
yeah.
These PVC cages aren't cheap and they are hard to get. So if you're
For
like
sure.
me and you pride in good PVC enclosures, just make sure you do it right the first time.
100%.
So
What kind are those behind you, by the way?
these are animal plastics.
Okay.
They're the T8, so they're 4x2x1s. These were all hand me downs over the years from friends selling them or hooking me up or whatever. And I will say they work great for adult carpets. And I can just barely fit my head in there sideways and turn and do some cleaning and whatnot. But in all honesty, if money and and there weren't any boundaries to getting them, and I had an ideal setup for an adult female carpet, it would be a 4 foot by at least 15 tall, just so I can add a shelf in there.
Nice.
I don't think they necessarily need it super tall unless you're willing to add extra wattage and heat management in order to maintain that larger airspace. And I think, getting different levels, no matter how high it is off the ground, kind of gives them that feeling of being off the ground. They like shelves a lot. And you can get creative with 15 inches, 18 inches. You can put branches and perches and stuff in. So, 12 inches works, and my animals are, thriving in them. But in a perfect world, I would have everybody in, 15 to 18 inch tall cages. I would even love to, ultimately have a finite collection other than a few babies that I hold back every so often, where all the females are in 4-footers, all the males are in like 3-footers, and then, babies born and raised in racks until they can go into a smaller enclosure with some confidence. So that would be the ideal system for me down the line. I really enjoy having glass front enclosures with lights so I can see my animals, really pay attention to their behavior, and just keep a closer eye on them.
For sure. Yeah, I feel the same way a lot of the time, but then I see something and I'm like, I need that species.
Ooh, shiny. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy Middleton DM'd me about thylacine footage coming out. So that's crazy.
Oh, snap.
Don't have the chance to look at that while we're doing this, but what's that all about? Let us know. Did they find one?
Yeah.
Is it real?
Yeah. I think we assumed it went extinct way too soon, and I think it's actually been around longer than we think. And there's some folks that hypothesize that there are still some out there in some remote areas, so that's why there's such a stir about it. But I'm not plugged into that.
I would love for that to be true.
That would be sweet. Dave Kendrick asks, any leaks on how the carpet complex will look after the new book comes out? I don't know anything for sure. Nick keeps those things close to his chest, and I know better than to ask. That being said, knowing Nick and having gone herping with him once recently since, the talks of the new book while he's been working on it, and just how things have changed over the years, I'm going to guess that some things are going to be lumped together that have been differentiated, but I think it will be still discernible, just more in a locality variety instead of a full subspeciation, because subspeciation is really, really hard to prove and validate. And if it's going to be disproven, I find that's going to be, maybe something that will warrant future research to resurrect subspecies if that's what somebody wants to do. But I think we're going to see, jungles and coastals and things like that kind of be defined by the same, speciation, but maybe more locality difference. And what we're seeing is just in their point of evolution, this is where they are at. I don't know. I think some stuff is going to change. Like I hope inlands get raised to full species status.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah. When I talked to him last, he said that the preliminary results have been pretty interesting, but that not enough of those gene locusts, I think the word is, have been sequenced for him to make any definitive decisions yet.
So then maybe nothing will change, right? And it'll just be speculative.
It's hard. And I was talking about this with Loafman recently too. And what Zach was saying, which is an interesting perspective, is that this technology with the mitochondrial genome sequencing and whatnot is, in his words, just incredibly new. And really the science of it is in its infancy. And it's, like what the scientists are looking for and deeming significant is different now than it even was just a year or two ago. So what Zach was saying is that it really does have to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt, and you have to look at a lot of genes to get a good idea. You can't just base your conclusions on one gene. Which is really interesting and way above my head and my pay grade, but it's going to be really, really interesting to see what they do with that in the book. and how they describe what their methods were, for dummies like me to understand.
Yeah, I mean, you have a handle on what field biology entails as a field biologist.
Right.
I have participated in field biology work over the years in zoos and have, come to understand what that entails. And basically what it boils down to, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that a lot more sampling needs to be done across all species, subspecies, localities. A lot more time with the technology needs to be taken for further understanding and development before any definitive things can really come to light. But we're getting there, and a lot of things are suggesting that there could be some changes. But I mean, yeah, you have to think of the sample size that needs to be studied to have a comprehensive view, and even then it'll never be 100%. So,
and completely with a grain of salt, I might be off base here, but I think my understanding of what Zach was trying to get at is that even just within the individual animal itself, you can have wide divergence on one gene locus, but then maybe on another one it's like very close, right? Because there's a lot of these different genes to analyze in the single animal, of course. So I think, and I might be completely wrong, but I think that what he was trying to get across to me is that in the single animal, in the one animal you're looking at, you have to check a lot of different genes to get a better idea. But there's probably geneticists that would laugh at me right now and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because I don't.
Well, good thing nobody here's a geneticist right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Andy says there was trail camera footage with a male, a female, and a joey confirming they're actively reproducing and present in Northeast Tasmania. Wow. Everybody, thylacines are alive.
No, that is amazing.
You heard it here on Carpets and Coffee.
That is very cool. Now do Bigfoot.
Yeah. And Nessie and the Abominable Snow Monster and Dracula.
Dracula.
That'd be cool. I bet you
that's the one, huh? No Mothman.
What do you think Dracula would keep if he were a reptile keeper?
Probably something with fangs. He'd be a Hots keeper, right?
Yeah.
Fangs.
Yeah. I feel like he would keep black spitting cobras.
That's good. Yeah. I agree.
All right. Mystery solved.
There it is.
That was not part of our tangent plan. That just happened. Y'all were witness to some gold right now. My last tangent is that that Crebo female of mine is in fact gravid. I don't know if anybody watches my YouTube channel, but like I've been saying it and like kind of 95% certain, but every day I check on her, she gets bigger and bigger. Here, where am I going? There we go.
Nice. Yeah, look at that.
So she's literally about to pop. I'm going to feed her today, or attempt to feed her today. I don't know if she'll take. She's been taking every week thus far. If she doesn't take today, then I'm going to be popping a heat lamp right above her hide just to give her a little bit more of a basking spot, because I run her ambient. And then probably turn the room up a little bit. So we will see what happens, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
I got to get good eggs first.
Right.
There's a thing with Crebos. If your female is not big enough, there can be complications with egg deposition. Who knows? I could get a bunch of slugs.
How are you feeling about her size-wise from talking to John Michaels?
I feel like she's there. Everybody says around 6 feet is where you want, and she's right around 6 feet, just eyeballing it. She can go across the length of a 4-foot cage and double back on herself. I've seen the size of the eggs, so they're good size eggs, and she's going to be 5. She's 5 actually. So it's about as early as I'd want to breed her. So I feel really good, but then again, I also felt really good when I was pairing them in November and she almost died. So
right.
I clearly don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But that being said, everything that John has told me seems to show that I'm on the right track. So I'm encouraged by that. So we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely crossing fingers. And you're setting up an entirely different incubator, right? To
So
incubate low.
Yeah, I had to break down and buy a second incubator. I actually have a big 6-foot tall Sobe fridge that I've converted, and
Nice.
that's running, but that's set at 87 for python eggs. And Crebos, they live much cooler and their eggs cook much cooler, so they need it around 75, 76. So I got one of those smaller mini fridge looking incubators that Exoterra makes, but this one's a knockoff, kind of brand nameless manufacturer version that has a cooling feature in it, so it can drop down into the 50s, which are hard to get right now, dude. Everybody's buying everything in the reptile hobby, so I had to buy one off Amazon, couldn't even get one through the shop through work. So
wow.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So I'll be getting that as soon as I see her go into shed. I'll be plugging that in and making sure it can run for about 5 weeks before eggs are there, and
nice.
We'll let them cook at 75, which hardly seems like cooking, and see if I don't screw this up. So I really want to do well, because I want to finally, offer some for sale, because I know there's a lot of people who want some. There's a couple people who close friends are going to get, 1 or 2 and in trade, or because they deserve it, sort of thing. So especially with recent events, people losing animals, there's somebody in particular who I want to reach out to. So but yeah, I'm really excited about that. So that was my other tangent. I should have good Crebo eggs. And did you know that Crebo eggs are textured?
I did not.
Yeah,
just
almost
naturally,
like crocodile eggs, where they almost have
really,
weird coarseness to them. So I'm excited to see that.
Do you know off the top of your head what part of South America the blacktails are from?
Costa Rica, so northern Central America and northern South America. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
that's going to be so cool.
There's a lot of debate about whether unicolors and blacktails are the same thing, and I think they're. Yeah, I think I'm not up to speed, so I could be butchering this research, but I'm pretty sure genetically they're not different at all, but phenotypically, one does have a blacktail and the other doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I like the blacktails. I think that they are my favorite of the group.
You need to see a big 9-foot yellowtail in person before
That's probably true.
When you see one of those, because their heads are different, man. They're more angular, they're flatter, they're a little more chiseled, and they just turn around and they just give you this mean look, and you're like, oh, don't do it. Oh, shit. They're serious, dude. I had a big angry imported one turn around on me, and I was like, holy shit. This is amazing.
That's
I gotta be careful.
Yeah. And most of them are imported at this point, right? For the yellowtails.
Yeah, I mean, they're legally imported, so you see plenty of that. I just don't think that enough people have put pairs together for there to be much available captive born and bred. There certainly are plenty of folks, breeding them. John Michaels again is number one for a lot of the dry Marcon variety, but there's a handful of people with pairs here and there that produce them. So
nice. Yeah, someday, man, I would love, well, the blacktails, of course, but also those indigos with the red on the throat.
Yeah, so
nice.
Just like Morelia, once you get them, you realize you need all of them.
Of course.
So here's your lineup. You need blacktails, you need unicolors, you need yellowtails, you need the Eastern indigos and the black variety and the red throat variety. You need the Texas indigos, and then you need the Mexican indigos.
Yeah, the Mexican indigos are nice too.
Yeah. The Rubidus, the Guerreros, they have speckling and smoky and red, and
they're such cool snakes. I feel like I just wouldn't be able to do an indigo justice at the moment. I would want to give that snake so much space.
Sure. Yeah, that's why I've had the dry Marcon bug for 8 years almost now, and that's why I only have my 2 blacktails, because ultimately if I plan on expanding them, to me, they need to be treated like, put in the diamond room sort of deal, like have them in a cold room where you have individual, heat lamps on them that go on during the day. But otherwise, it's probably best to run them a little bit separately if you're running a big room of pythons, which, I fully get that, so.
Yeah.
But you can get one or two.
There you go.
They just grow so damn fast, though, dude. Like,
I've only
really
seen
do.
an indigo in person once.
Okay.
And it was at an animal sanctuary, but it was more just like a roadside attraction in Savannah, Georgia. And poor thing was in this tiny cage, and it was obese as all hell. It was the chunkiest thing I'd ever seen in my life.
That's too bad. And I can't say I haven't seen that before. I've seen a lot of people keep Cribos in really, really small enclosures. They need space. My male is in a 6-foot enclosure, and sometimes it's not enough for him. Like, he's just rubbing his face on things, and like, if they don't have enough room, they'll tell you. They'll rub their rostral scales raw. You'll always have depigmentation if they're in too small of an enclosure, and they'll always be defensive and pissed because they're always cornered. They need space for sure.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I would love to someday, if I do it, just do a big ass, zoo style naturalistic thing. I think that would just be so cool.
they use it. There are species that, like, if you go a sterile, blank, minimalistic enclosure, you're going to have a stereotypic behaving, stressed out animal. Like, they need bedding to burrow around, and they need stuff to smell. They need hides. They need, enrichment. They need a lot of things to kind of interact with and change it up regularly.
More monitor-like in a way,
Yeah, they seem to be more intellectually active all the time compared with other species that when they sleep, things kind of turn down. Like, these guys sleep at night, so during the day, like, they're out doing stuff all the time. Naturally, they're hunters. They're not ambush predators. They are hunters. They go out and murk stuff. Like, they don't find a rodent trail and sit there for weeks on end. They're like, rodent trail, boom, they're chasing.
They'll find the rodent,
like a car chase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, they're awesome snakes. And then the other thing to be mindful with them is that it's a limited gene pool. So, like, we in Morelia, I have no problem selling pairs, knowing that they might breed that pair down the line with blacktails. I'll only be selling somebody a pair if they're like, no, I intend on breeding this one to this line and this over here, because, inbreeding is a serious thing for this particular species. So, but
for sure. Yeah.
But that little note on enrichment is a good way to segue into that paper that you sent us, Owen, Eric, and I in the chat. And I'll kind of introduce this, and then I'll let you rip, because you probably have a better comprehensive understanding on it. But basically, the backstory for everybody listening and watching is this paper was done studying some North American rat snakes, if I'm not mistaken. It was 16 individuals, and they did a comparative study on a group that was given sort of a standard care style of housing with nothing flashy, no enrichment, just kind of the basics, nuts and bolts, hide, water, paper sort of thing. And then the other group was given a lot more attention to enrichment and novel items, to then eventually see how they handled novelty in their life down the road, and the comprehensive sort of analysis of what it meant for them intellectually. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting paper. Environmental enrichment alters the behavioral profile of rat snakes in the genus Elaphey, 2006. Okay. And part of why it's such an interesting paper, and why I sent it to you, Eric, and Owen, is because in the world of ethology, or animal behavior study, snakes are the ugly redheaded stepchild, right? Like, nobody pays attention to snakes because it's just assumed that they are pretty cognitively vacant, not super bright, just guided by instinct and reactivity.
The reptilian brain sort of
right
thought process.
It gets tricky because snakes they're a constant poker face in a way. It's very hard to interpret what a snake is thinking, feeling, or doing because they don't really emote for us, right? So in that respect, it becomes subjective very, very quickly. And because of that, it's really hard to do any kind of meaningful behavioral analysis on snakes in a way that will actually get through the academic peer review process. And this is one of those papers that managed to do that successfully. So just kind of quick synopsis. Study investigated the effects of environmentally enriched and standard laboratory housing conditions on the behavioral performance of 16 rat snakes in a split clutch design. So some of the snakes were housed in, quote, enriched environments, and the others were housed in standard conditions, just paper water bowl hide versus a more enriched naturalistic setup, right? With like decor, cage decor and fake I think fake plants and whatnot.
Bedding, fake plants,
substrate, yep,
logs,
organic substrate,
yeah,
100%.
Pieces of snake decoration, terrarium furnishings.
Yeah, stuff that we would call, quote, naturalistic.
Okay.
And what was really interesting here is that the enriched condition snakes tended to habituate more quickly than standard condition snakes to certain tasks. It was kind of task-based experimentation. That they did a few different forms of that, one of which was kind of like a maze style thing, right? Like find the right hole to get the reward. The snakes that lived in the enriched environments across the board were able to perform that task quicker and acclimate to the testing environment faster, which is really interesting in terms of what that says about their cognitive function, right? Like clearly their brain is more well developed for them to learn quicker and perform a task more successfully. And then another part of this that was interesting is that they did some fancy statistics at the end of it all, and that quote, discriminant function analysis was able to correctly assign every single one of those snakes back to their appropriate housing treatment group. So it was able to determine whether they were one of the snakes that lived in an enriched environment or a standard environment, 100% based on the data from the testing. So it was the results were consistent enough for an algorithm to know you were an enriched snake because you did this successfully, and vice versa. So that's kind of the overview. And when I sent this to the chat, I guess you brought up a really great question, which is like, what's the point?
Yeah,
I
was at first I thought maybe they were studying this to see how they could better prepare a snake to maybe go back to the wild for reintroduction. So I was curious if that was the end goal, but I guess there doesn't necessarily have to be an end goal in research.
And I think that in this particular case, there's not a stated end goal. It's more of I guess welfare consideration, which kind of got me thinking, like, what is the benefit to us as private hobbyist keepers of having smarter snakes? Is there a benefit? Do we even care? Do we want them to be dumber? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's definitely peace of mind in knowing that there's a way we can make our animal welfare measurably better, in that simply adding tank decorations and not leaving things bare and scarce makes them a little bit intellectually more capable down the line. I guess, the ultimate benefit as somebody who's not going to release their animals in the wild is knowing that your snakes are maybe less stressed about things and better capable of interacting with you or novel experiences in the snake room or whatever it is. And it's just kind of interesting to know that, there is benefit to putting that fake plant, putting those logs in there, moving things around, changing the substrate every once in a while, trying new things, textures, scents,
Yeah.
basically. And it's neat to see that because it's all happening. Like that paper you said was from 2006.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So it's neat to see that in 2006, somebody was able to quantify that and get that paper through peer review, where right now, 14 years later, we have somebody like Lori Torini out there
Right.
Doing a lot of training and behavioral modification and documenting it via video. And this study from 14 years prior basically backs up another thing that she's doing, which is demonstrating that these snakes are smart and that enrichment is important, and that that we can very easily and quantifiably improve the welfare of our snakes inside their little plastic boxes or tubs. And it doesn't just have to happen in cages. You can throw fake plants and things in a tub in a rack system. You can throw bedding in a rack system. You can change things up. You can move things around every so often. You can add sheds of other animals in there for some scent enrichment. You can change texture, play into the natural history of your animal. What do snakes really focus on? Well, for the ones that aren't very visually cued in, we know they follow scent a lot and texture and kind of explore based on what they're experiencing. So we can, kind of play to their strengths in that regard. Or animals that are you can do a lot of things. So, yeah, it's just really interesting to see because, the snake side of reptile keeping is sort of the last holdout to publicly acknowledge that their animals could benefit from enrichment. And
absolutely.
And it's difficult. I get it. It's hard to procure scents or new things for your animals, but it can be done.
Right. And it can be done simply as well. It doesn't have to be difficult. I feel like, but yeah, it's especially interesting because like when I was first getting into the hobby, which in my case is not that long ago, right? Maybe 4 or 5 years at this point, like people would just say that all that stuff is for the keeper, not the kept, like, yeah, you can do plants, you can do all these things, but the snake doesn't care.
I up until recently was one of those people that would say like, yeah, you can add fake plants in there, but I'm not really sure they care. And it's probably more for your aesthetics. Like, fully admit doing that.
For sure. And I've definitely said it too. And that's why this paper is so interesting, because advocates of naturalistic keeping or more enriched enclosures, or even people that are just trying to figure out if it does anything, this proves that it does do something, at least in rat snakes.
Right. Extrapolate as you will based on the different
It's probably
species.
fair to extrapolate. I mean, when you think about it, it's so like, it just makes sense, right? If you're giving the snake something to investigate and tongue flip upon and interact with, right? Like, think of like a baby and you're trying to get those, what is it, neural pathways firing or whatever. It's probably the same thing. It's like they're not going to exercise their brain if there's nothing for them to exercise their brain on. And when I was thinking about, maybe what would be beneficial for private keepers having more intelligent animals, even with no plans of reintroducing anything into the wild. I was thinking that perhaps the smarter, more intelligent animals might be better mothers, if you're one to do MI type stuff, maybe the more cognitively developed snake is the one that doesn't lay the eggs in the water bowl, doesn't kick them around the cage.
Maybe produces babies that feed sooner.
Right. It's really
smarter animals.
To think about. And just from like a completely detached perspective, like for me, I just think it's better and more interesting to have a smarter snake. Like in my mind, it just seems like that's one step closer to keeping that piece of nature in a box. That and a more intelligent animal that has been able to exercise its brain and develop these capabilities is probably a lot closer to the snake you pick up on the ground in Australia than something that is just kind of, sitting in the box like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you right now, one of the most beneficial, things about my Crebos for me as a keeper is seeing how smart they are seeing how intelligent and tuned in they are, how much they watch. If I hide food, how good they are at finding it and hunting it down. And the intelligence factor that they bring, that activity, that, palpable sense of more going on upstairs, makes them more exciting for me to keep.
Yeah.
And so just, speaking on that, I enjoy a more intelligent animal in that regard.
Exactly.
There's value right there.
Yeah. And like you said too, less stress. Like the study also points out that the enriched snakes were less reactive in what's called an open field task, right? Basically, you just like throw the snake in a big box and see what it does. And less reactivity is less stress, and we all know that even low levels of stress, if they don't get to calm down for long periods of time, is just directly detrimental to health. So that could really directly influence the longevity of your animal too.
Sure.
Because stress kills.
Yeah. I've recently, well, not recently, a couple months ago, I moved a 2 or 3 year old. What is she? She'll be 3 this year. I moved a 3-year-old het axanthic Papuan into a 41 quart, and she's still very small. She's like, inch in diameter, maybe 2.5 feet long, like small. But I moved her in early because I knew I could provide her the appropriate climate, but also have more room to clutter the enclosure, put some fake plants in, a bigger hide, things like that, and see if it made a difference. And I mean, right now she still is the devil. I'll have to make a video on her because her and her sibling are quite the exception to the rule. They are just angry. I mean, I would be very curious to see what a camera would pick up when I'm not around. When I'm present, it's a whole nother ballgame. She will bite the tub. She'll bite the hook. She'll bite every dude. Wow. She is mean.
That's just of Satan over there,
dude. And they switch off. You can't get her running and then it turns off. No, you get her running and she comes launching back. She is bad news.
Wow.
And they both are. They like hit the tubs. They're angry. So perching fake plants, tubes, like they don't give a damn. When I'm present, it's game on. So they're tough nuts to crack. The rest of them, I'm sure would absolutely show the benefit. So it's really interesting. I keep a lot of the old pieces of wood and hides and fake plants and things from over the years of keeping reptiles and just picking stuff up along the way. And I find myself using it more now than I did say 5 years ago. Just, sticks, logs, moss, leaf litter, all this stuff. Just
for sure.
I'm not necessarily seeing my animals utilizing it and giving me, behavioral feedback, but this paper definitely makes me feel better about doing it. That's for sure.
Definitely. And an interesting thing to think about too is that a lot of the snake's perception of the world is through things that we don't quite pick up on, which is those chemical cues, right? And like if one of my snake sheds, I'll toss the shed in a different snake's enclosure to give them something, some chemical cues, some interesting sense to just grapple with for a while, to occupy their mind. And even if they don't go over there and investigate it, you can be pretty sure that they know it's there. And, you definitely, at least for a few moments, had them stop and think, what the heck is that? Am I scared of that? Do I want to eat that? And then maybe they move on. But, that's something really easy you can do. Rotate sheds, rotate hides. If it's all within your own collection, like there's no harm in doing that.
Right.
And I think you've talked about that before in one of your videos, and that was great. I followed suit.
Yeah, it's interesting when it's hard to ignore once you give your snakes a new novel stimuli and you see them react. It's hard to ignore that there's something there, it's very noticeable. Like, I mean, we like to think and say kind of collectively as a hobby that snakes don't see that well. And I think that's, with each passing day, I disbelieve that more and more.
And super species specific too,
Absolutely. But even the animals that we think just rely on their heat pits and shadow detection and motion and scent, those animals are much more visually cued in than I think we give them credit for. I think, when I put the lights in, the first thing that happened was my 2 jungle females came up and went up and checked them out. My Darwin female was checking it out. The hognose were checking it out. Species specific, of course, but everybody was kind of like, what the hell is that? What did you just turn on? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, when I'll be in here recording or doing stuff, and if my Crebo isn't hiding in gravage, she's staring at me through the window. And obviously, again, species specific, but my rainbow bows will sit under a leaf when they know I'm in the room for any given amount of time and stare out the window, hoping to get fed. And there's just more to these animals than I think we're able to physically perceive. So I think, until we know definitively that something doesn't benefit them or changes nothing, I think there's no harm in trying and doing everything, right?
I agree 100%. And when you're talking about visual acuity, I looked over because the falsie epitomizes that for me. It's like the most visual snake I've ever encountered. He's staring at me right now. His head is on the lip up against the glass, looking right at me.
Yep.
Like, I wish that I could move my computer over there, but it would mess up my mic.
Yeah, I think just having that experience, even at somebody else's collection, is vital to understanding that there's more to these snakes than we know. Like, even if you only keep one species or something, just seeing that is pretty cool to see. It's like working with monitors. When a monitor looks at you, that they're looking right back at you.
Part of why I really love the blackheads too. I noticed that level of spatial awareness in them more than I do the womas.
The womas just look for something to bite.
Yeah, 100%. But the blackheads, I feel like there's another level to their perception, I guess. I don't know. Yeah,
definitely.
Speaking of which,
yeah,
post-ovulation shit.
Yeah. So I'm hoping when I go back to work, it'll just be a couple days for that female to have her shed. When I was there yesterday picking up a drill bit, she's already passed the super deep blue phase as of like today, basically. So a couple more days, I bet you 3, 4, maybe 5 more days, and we'll have a post-op shed. So yep,
sweet.
Blackhead eggs are coming.
I think about it every day.
Yeah, it's neat, honestly, because it's like I feel like I'm getting the experience of keeping and breeding blackheads without keeping or breeding blackheads. Yeah. Like I'm taking care of them, I'm feeding them, I'm pairing them, I'm maintaining them, I'm watching them, but they're not mine and they're not at my house. So it's like I get the experience without any of the cost or spatial requirements, which is neat.
That's
it's
awesome.
Good experience.
Yeah. I'm jealous. I wish I was there every day seeing them do their thing during this process.
It's cool.
That's awesome.
It's really neat. So, and Grant always lets me know, like, if he moves anybody or sees locks, he's like, "Oh, check this out,"
Nice.
So, Andy Middleton asked a little bit ago, and I didn't want to forget it. It was just in the middle of what we were talking about. Any tips or tricks on setting up and dialing in an incubator? He just got a new hot box, and it just got fired up this morning.
Nice.
How do you guys monitor temps in the egg box? So, I first of all, congratulations on the new incubator. Hotbox is a great company and they make an excellent product. I've heard nothing but good things about those. Quite stable, insulate well, very reliable. So you shouldn't have any issues. Dialing them in, I definitely think it's valuable to have them running at least a month before you ever expect to put eggs in them. If you want to sort of see how it performs, you can take little thermometers or temperature gauges and put them throughout the incubator, top corners, bottom corners, center, and kind of see how balanced it is. And then, the other thing you can do is set up an egg box, how you intend to use it full, substrate or water or whatever, put it in there and put a temperature probe in there, see what it reads. And then you can calibrate your incubator accordingly. So if you have your thermostat on your incubator set to 88, you set your egg box in there and you find that it's sitting at 86, you bump it up a degree if your goal is to get it to 87. So you calibrate things. And then that way you kind of have a better understanding of what's going on exactly in there. The other thing you can do, if you're really interested in being tech savvy, is get some of those sensor push buttons, or there's other brands on Amazon where it's like a wireless temp and humidity reader that you can check on your phone through an app and stuff like that. So you can get those. Definitely don't put the thermostat probe in the egg box. Just have it running for the ambient of the incubator. You want to understand what the incubator does in order for the egg box to do your desired thing. If you're trying to have things fluctuate with the eggs, you can screw up the rest of the incubator, because eventually eggs do put off their own heat, and you could actually cause the incubator to drop in temperature because it's thinking there's plenty of heat already. So if you're doing, big projects or lots of eggs, just be mindful of that. So for me, I have my probe kind of running right in the middle of the incubator, and I know it's not 100% perfect top to bottom, but that's okay for me. I don't need that precision, honestly, after doing MI and seeing how much those eggs took temperature and fluctuation. I'm not so concerned about it anymore.
Yeah.
That being said, I've been running it for several seasons now, and I know how it works. So, I know if I put, eggs up at the top, that the fan might impact those boxes a little bit more. So I, choose the egg boxes accordingly as well. And, there's lots of little things like that, but running it ahead of time and measuring your parameters ahead of time is the best peace of mind you can do.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a great question. I also got one of those sea serpents hot boxes, and hopefully this will be my first year using it. Right. So I'm going to have to do that as well. And what I was planning on doing, I forget the name, but there are these little thermometer temperature humidity doodahs that you can get that track and plot the data for you. I forget the name. I'm sure there's a bunch of different brands, but I'm planning on setting it all up once I know that I'm probably going to have some eggs coming, like you said, maybe a month or so in advance. Set those things up, top, bottom, inside the box. Because what I'm really curious to see is whether I get a spike in temperature overnight, and whether I need to set a night drop, because I know that my apartment gets cold at night. We don't have heat. So the incubator might be kicking into overdrive, trying to keep things at 87 or 88 when it's colder outside, but that might actually result in it being a little bit too hot. So definitely things to watch for,
Yeah. I mean, that PVC sheeting should insulate pretty well, but that is something to definitely keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. So it'll be cool to see. Definitely want to get it dialed in before there's eggs to worry about.
Yeah. You don't want to be caught out in the snow without a jacket. You know what I mean?
That's the one, Govee. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, Govee. That's another brand. Yeah, same deal.
Thanks, Earl.
Yeah, anything you can do to add some extra insight into what's going on and do it ahead of time will help you dial it in. So,
right.
Yeah. So yeah, that enrichment paper, good stuff. Dialing in incubator,
good tips in the chat too. I like what Jonathan said. He said every once in a while he takes reusable sterile rat traps with the door, but he doesn't put poison in there. He puts a rat in there, so it's like a little puzzle box for the snake to get out of. That's awesome.
Yeah, like with my Crebos, I'll give them one rodent just to occupy their mouth, and then I'll put some around the enclosure, and they'll find them. They never last more than 10 minutes. It's something to do, and it's just a little bit different than the monotonous. Here's your food. Here's your food. Here's your food.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
yep, I do that for the blackhead too. I hit a quail last night, and they always track it down.
Yeah. Have you tried doing chicken drumsticks at all? I've seen Grant feed drumsticks to one of the blackheads. She ate it, no problem.
Nice. I haven't yet, but definitely will. The girl just got big enough to do a quail, or at least the quail that I had, kind of small, medium. But yeah, when she's big enough, I'll definitely toss some drumsticks to her.
Yeah, it's interesting to think
anything
about
I can do to
food enrichment too.
Yeah, anything I can do to mix up that nutrient load and not rely too heavily on the rats.
Yeah,
I'll do it for sure.
Yeah. Recently, my Crebos have been getting a lot of bird prey, just to give them a lean spring feed,
For sure, yeah.
But carpets are warming up and getting rats and mice again now, so it's like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to refill the freezer soon.
Oh yeah, no, me too. I need to drop a few $100s on food. I have nothing right now.
Yeah, I pulled things out to pull rodents, and I was like, dang, there's nothing left in here. This is empty.
What I was going to say though is at the old fish market that I used to work at, I know that we have the hookups for fresh trays of like 8 to 10 ounce rainbow trouts, and they're cheap. Like rainbow trout is one of the cheapest fish, like human consumption grade fish products you can buy.
Interesting,
because they're farmed and readily available. But I'm definitely going to get a tray of that and feed some trout to the fall season. I bet blackhead would take trout as well.
Oh yeah, probably.
Walmers will eat anything.
Yeah,
yeah.
We've got a g'day from Australia. G'day. Gotta love having folks from the motherland here.
How is it down there?
Yeah. Oh man.
Do you ever feed chicks to Morelia? Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Brettles
absolutely.
are big time bird eaters in the wild.
Darwin's too. Darwin's will take them. Yep.
For sure.
I don't do it heavily because I know that like beaks and the toenails can be kind of hard to digest sometimes, but I also don't run mine as hot as some people do. I don't like to give them like 90-degree hot spots. I aim for like 88, 87. So stuff that's typically harder to digest, I do sparingly.
That is a good point. If you do feed the chicks, just be prepared for a little bit of something special the other end on the way out.
Feathers. Yep.
It's a different kind of smell.
Yeah, you can see that again. Yeah. But it's definitely good to enrich them. You know, that different type of feather roughage through the digestive system is good for them. Different fat content, different protein content, different oils. Speaking of which, somebody was asking me the other day if you need like the calcium and vitamin supplements for your snakes. And I've definitely heard of people adding like vitamin C oil into a rodent or injecting some supplement into a rodent, but I've never actually done it.
Right.
And I always think about that.
I haven't done it either, but
I've never found my animals to be deficient of something.
Right.
But I'm wondering, you know, what we could potentially add as very snake-centric supplements into food that might help with skin condition, organ function over long periods of time, things like that.
Yeah, interesting question for sure. Loafman has told me he does calcium powder on the trout actually when he's feeding it to falsies, but I haven't had a chance to ask why. But
well, I know when you're doing like, even if it's frozen thawed, the fish loses a lot of good vitamins, so I could see that just being a nice way to supplement that. But even like rats, like, you know, a big rat has a good skeletal system, so there's some calcium, but they're also pretty fat from our diet and things. So I'm wondering if there's like, you know, if we know that like most snakes kept in captivity tend to be deficient in like vitamin D or calcium or vitamin A or something like that, is there a snake-centric and safe way to dose feeders to supplement them?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I do food variety, just because I hope that the variety of food at least, you know, add some different minerals and vitamins and things.
And this goes to what we were talking about when I saw you 2 days ago, which is just, what does your rodent eat? You know, if your rodent doesn't have a good nutritious diet and is nutrient deficient, then that just goes up the food chain, doesn't it? So, you know, if you're feeding your rodent a lot of good produce and things with micronutrients and all that goodness, then that goes to your snake. Versus, you know, God knows what's in the conventional lab rat chow, if you will. Who knows what's in that? So,
well, yeah, I mean, if you give rodents like insects and grains and fruits and veggies and things like that, you give them a diverse diet. I mean, that's pretty natural for what they would eat in the wild. So I would imagine that's probably the way to go, even if it isn't necessarily super commercially affordable or easy to do. You know, we talk about in the hobby gut loading insects for our feeder lizards and things. To me, it seems like it's on the same level.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, if any of you do your own rodent colonies, throw some carrots in with your mice, throw some crickets in there, watch them smash on some crickets or some superworms, like stuff like that. It's interesting stuff. You know, obviously to quantify it, it would take years and years of study and testing animals on a specific diet and regimen and over generations and whatnot. But I think it can't hurt. And if there's any product manufacturers out there listening, maybe some sort of liquid injectable reptile or snake safe thing that you can like inject into your rodents, like because you know how they have the liquid gel vitamin D, you know, pills, I guess you could take, like make it very safe, because obviously, you know, dosage and drug regulations in the country are important, but maybe a powder is the only way and you just roll the rodent in it. But
Yeah, it would be a very interesting study and probably something that could be done just to get a good population size of captive snakes and actually just see what they're deficient in. You
Mhm.
know, snakes kept under standard conditions, like maybe they're good, but it would be interesting to know
Mhm.
what vitamins, minerals that we perhaps are neglecting, if anything. And yeah, like Ish points out, veterinary medicine supplementation isn't always necessary. In some cases, it can be a bad thing. Not all of that stuff's water soluble, right? So
Right.
if you OD on the wrong thing, even it's too much of a good thing, right? So
Yeah, you can over
um,
supplement calcium,
for sure, yeah,
it's definitely possible. So
right.
I think that's probably why it hasn't come to such a normalized thing, because you can overdo it, and that's why there's regulation in such controlled, supplements and things. So
Yeah, exactly. The stuff that isn't water soluble, you can't just like pee out the extra. You know, your body has to manage that, store
mhm,
it, deal with it in
mhm.
some way, which when there's like way too much, that's not
Yeah.
good. So,
Yeah, and who knows? It could have benefits for liver function and kidney function to prevent organ failure in older reptiles. I've
mhm.
definitely seen older lizards get up there, and then what ends up doing it is just age related things, like any biological organism. Eventually, their functions and organs burn out more or less.
Right.
And maybe these supplements are just good at prolonging their life and longevity. You know.
Definitely. Yeah,
I think there's tons of merit in studying that. Although, as I say that, somebody could be 20 years into that study and not even close. So
for
it's
sure.
tough. I understand. I understand, but at least food for thought for people considering it.
Definitely.
Maybe there's somebody out there who will take it and run with it, and 40 years
Yeah.
from now
Yeah,
we'll
somebody pitch it to Loafman and go move to
yeah,
West Liberty.
there you go. There you go.
I can't do that kind of study remote because I don't have access to like the labs to like
Well, and
analyze
you
blood
need a
work and stuff like
massive
that.
sample size of animals. You need
Right.
hundreds of animals,
Yeah, which
and
they have on campus, but I don't have here.
yeah, it would be some serious undertaking for sure.
Like there's grad students on campus doing some really cool stuff like with crypto and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, that
Mm,
sounds fun. I'm over here in California. Like
yeah.
no fancy lab equipment here.
Well, at least you get to play with your snakes for school.
Yes, not complaining.
Play. Yeah, yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
The
I'm
other thing.
actually oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
go for it. No, no, no. You.
Oh, okay. Speaking of the enrichment paper, before we leave that behind, I think what I'm going to do um, for the second half of my thesis, which I've had to nail down very quickly in the past week, is kind of adopt the open field part of that paper and construct like an enriched environment. And I'm going to assess and compare the like behavioral profiles and cognitive development of AI versus MI babies. So it's like
Mm,
part one of the thesis is AKA, can you get a bigger baby? Which anecdotally, we all know probably yes. MI babies tend to be bigger,
mhm,
like your data suggested as well. Um, and then part two will be, is there any inherent difference in the behavioral profile or cognitive ability of group A versus group B,
mhm.
and figure out how to assess that in the neonates. So
Yeah,
that's what we're doing.
that'll be sweet. That'll be
My
really
guess is there won't be a difference, but if there was, that would be really weird.
even finding out that there isn't a difference is still good data to have.
Right. Right.
If I am so lucky to be blessed with a Bredli clutch, and she
Mm,
beehives and does her thing, I'll let her go MI all day.
that would be great. Yeah,
So
for sure.
I've been kind of thinking about it, looking at who's going to go, and she might, well, I guess the citrus tiger, she could do it. Um, I doubt my Xanac coastal will, just based on last year's performance where she scattered the eggs everywhere. So unless she becomes a good mom this year, it might just be the Bredli and or the citrus tiger. And just because the citrus tiger is such a long haul project that I've been waiting for, I'm not worried about doing MI. She's either going to do it or she's not. I've got the incubator running if she ditches the clutch or something. So I think
Yeah.
I'm going to try it. I made a promise to myself I want to do MI. as much as possible, at least one clutch a season, just to keep up the experience. I don't know if mentally, I think, say the citrus tiger head albino does go. I don't know if that data is necessarily going to be super valuable just because it's a subspecies cross in some way, the
Sure.
Darwin coastal stuff. So from like a study standpoint, it'll only really contribute to anecdotal stuff as far as like measurable data. I think it would have to be excluded. Just
still interesting for you and I, but
yeah,
maybe not for the academic world.
Right. I mean, that's my assumption, being that they're it's a cross project. So
yeah, it is interesting though. And I was talking to Nick about all this a couple weeks back, and I think he's planning on trying to collect data for all of his carpet clutches this year, not just the brittle stuff. So there might be just some footnote at some point in the in the write-up that says, in these other sister taxa, we noticed X, Y, and Z, but we can't necessarily apply it to brittle specifically. But it's interesting nonetheless. Yeah.
I'm going to step away for the bathroom, but while I do that, will you kind of go over the details you're going to focus on, and procedurally what you'd like to measure and study in this MI particular Bredli related study?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that is something that I've had to pull together very recently. I was kind of scrambling, to be honest. I had a deadline for an outline of my thesis proposal yesterday. So chapter 1 of what I'm looking at here is going to be the reproductive success and neonate fitness of maternally incubated versus artificially incubated Bredl's pythons. So reproductive success, that's easy. That's easy to quantify. What are the hatch rates? Who had better reproductive success, better fecundity, et cetera, and part of that metric is going to be just how many eggs were there, how many eggs hatched, but we're also going to be keeping detailed weights of all of the females pre-temperature cycling. We took all the weights, and we'll take weights again once eggs are on the ground, and then we'll take weights again when mom's done and babies emerge from MI coils. And what's going to be interesting about that data is we're really going to be able to see how much was taken out of a mother that was prescribed to artificial just from producing the clutch versus how much was taken out of mom that was put through an MI season, right? How much did she lose from A, laying the eggs, and B, maintaining the eggs? And then once you have that information too, there's a lot of adjacent data that we can look into, like how many feedings does it take artificial mom to get back to her initial weight? How many feedings does it take maternal mom to get back to her initial weight? And what are the implications for that in terms of whether you can or should do multiple seasons of MI in a row, or if they really do need that year off, otherwise you're doing them a disservice, stuff like that. And then neonate fitness, that's been a bit of a tricky one for me to figure out how to quantify, because fitness seems like a little bit of a subjective term, especially when we're talking about a captive setting. But what we're going off of at the moment is measurements of mass, weight, snout vent length, physiological measurements like that, with the assumption being that bigger babies are more prepared to thrive and survive in that they got more yolk. They can go for a longer period of time without their first feed because they have that energy reserve. And then that kind of led me to that second chapter, which is that fitness and robustness and survivability, the physiological aspects of that is only one half. Another half of that is cognitive ability, behavioral tendencies, right? And so that's why I'm going to at least try to adopt what's called an ethogram, where there's going to be a long list of all the potential behaviors the snake could exhibit. perching, hiding, digging, you know, et cetera, objective in behaviors that are clear as day, you know, nothing like happy or scared, because then people can point at you and be like, how do you know?
Yeah.
And so then you put the snake in, well, all the babies are going to be housed in a neutral condition, and then you put the snakes in this kind of open field jungle gym, if you will, and each one's going to stay in there, and this is all subject to change, but this is the plan so far. Each one's going to stay in there for 20 hours, and at hour 0, 1, 10, and 20, we're going to have a camera, and we're going to take 10 minutes of video. And then for each of those 10-minute segments, I'm going to do tally marks on the ethogram. What is the behavior? You know, if the snake's up perching, dash for perch, you know, and then each animal will go through that course a few times. You'll be able to see hopefully trends, and then we'll apply some fancy statistics and see if any of the trends are significant. And that is the plan for now. But it could all come crashing and burning down. So
well, and that's the thing with running experiments, is you have to be flexible enough to alter the course of your hypothesis as you get feedback too. So
absolutely,
you'll roll with the punches, and you'll get some results and data one way or the other. So
yeah, I'm really confident about the first part of everything, just that very simple AI versus MI, because as long as the snakes work with me and lay, we're good. You know, there's gonna be data for that. The behavior thing is where I'm a little bit kind of, we'll see how it goes. And
sure.
And what Loafman has told me is that I would probably be the first grad student to not change their thesis at some point during the course of the studies, if I actually stick with these ideas. Like, everybody ends up having to tweak. So
sure,
we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, just because in my one clutch sample size, I saw remarkable difference in the offspring from previous years doing artificial incubation. So I'm really curious to see if you get similar results, if you get big, healthy, robust babies. You know, maybe, I mean, you've already got a lot to measure and observe in this study as is, assuming, you know, you do it across like 4 clutches or whatever,
right,
or however many.
Got the 4 here, and then hopefully 2 on campus, and then 6 with mutton.
Right. So, you know, you'll have 12 potential clutches of data to collect. So, you know, adding more on there is not a small task, but it would be also interesting to see, maybe, as, I don't know how you'd quantify it as a measure of fitness with everything else, but, you know, how soon the animals begin feeding.
Yes, that's another one that we're going to look at as well. Yeah, 100%.
I don't know.
Your data,
you can quantify it basically just by, like, they eat or they don't eat, but, like,
right,
you know, when do you start feeding? When, you know, and how does that affect things? What does that tell you about their yolk? And then, is that even feasible for you, the university, and Nick? Like,
right, yeah, and your data with that, it is in line with what Nick has observed as well. You know, like, he's never published results, but he's definitely taken that data and also noticed a trend for the bigger, more fit babies in the MI clutches. And we're also going to stick data loggers under the coils in the egg mass and see how much mom is controlling things, you know, all that good stuff. Like, it's really going to be a matter of just try to get as much data as possible and figure out what to do with it later.
Yeah. First step is getting eggs on the ground. Second step is sneaking the data logger in there and being able to get your measurements. So make sure everything's charged up ahead of time.
Oh yeah, exactly. We're trying to get a bunch of iButtons, little, like, coin-sized data loggers that we can just slip in there, but those suckers are pricey, so we'll see how it goes.
Smaller, more expensive, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But they're worth it. You know, you'll get good informational feedback that way.
Yeah, and Wolfman was saying those things, he's stuck them in crayfish dens in the bottom of rivers for like years at a time, so the durability factor is there.
Yeah, you want it to be able to function and keep sending data.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But that's the plan. I will.
Cool.
I'll
That'll
see
be
how it
sweet.
goes. I
That'll
know
be
it's
nice.
funny. I was talking to my other friend who did grad school, but like for engineering, and he was like, "Oh, that sounds good. Like that'll be no problem." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like the snake could just not lay eggs, and then all of my plans are garbage." You
Yeah,
know,
that's
like
another thing. Like,
it's all out of my hands to an extent.
yeah, working with an animal is a whole nother variable just in itself.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I'm
Yeah.
not the only one in control here. That is for certain.
All you can do is cross your fingers and hope that you gave them the best resources and whatnot possible to actually follow through with this experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, that'll be cool, man.
Yeah.
And then the other subject that I thought we would talk about is what defines a line,
Right.
an actual line of
Yes.
animals, a lineage that is worth being named as a line and not just an animal that came from somebody. So
Right. So when I produce Brussels pythons for the very first time this year, I'm going to pick one and I'm going to say this is the Lucas Lee line because I bred snakes once.
yeah,
Right?
so
No?
what defines the line is not just making animals. Anybody can produce animals. It's refining a look, it's refining a phenotype, it's refining a genotype, it's doing something that has its own characteristics and doing it multiple times so it's a repeatable, quantifiable thing. Taking two wild-caught Papuans, breeding them together for one time does not make that my line of Papuan carpets.
Damn it.
So I just call them F1s because they are from wild-caught animals. They're the first generation, first filial generation, so F1s. Now, if I take those F1s, breed them together, breed siblings together, because that is the start of line breeding. When you take a look within a group and breed it to finesse that or refine it, redefine it, creating those F2s, then starts the very first generation of what I could then call as my line.
Okay.
The wild-caught animals would be founders. The F1s would be founders. The F2s would be the first generation of ones worthy of that name, whatever I call it, line. Somebody just simply within Morelia, because we have such a finite population of animals, somebody produces animals first, right? Somebody produced them first before you, and you bought those and then produced a clutch. That doesn't constitute a line. So Lucas produces Lucas produces hypo stonewashed stripes from animals that Nick produced, and he then subsequently
did all the work for like 15 years. Yeah.
Lucas then does not get to call those offspring Lucas Lee line hypo stonewashed stripes because the legwork to set him up was done prior by somebody else. Now, if he takes that, goes a direction with it, aims for a certain look of stripe, takes offspring, breeds them together, makes that first generation of them, and then keeps going.
Breed out the head stamp or something, like something that is significant and observable.
Right. It has to be quantifiable in some way. Yeah. Then it is your line, but even still, it's got to be reproducible. Yep. And it has to be not a one-off thing. It has to be something that you can line breed, repeat, do it at least once or twice, and show that it's repeatable.
Random variation in your clutch does not count until you can get consistent results. And I think that the other thing that constitutes a legitimate line is when somebody has founder stock of like a new species, right? That like has not been here prior. Like obviously we talk about the Afors Brettles. That's a line. Lazic Brettles. That's a line because I think those were the first Brettles that came in, so stuff like that. Like if the, you know what I mean? Like that's not based on a physiological trait. That's based on origin of animal.
Right. So I can't take two Lazic line animals, breed them together, then breed siblings together and call it Riley's Reptiles line. It's still Lazarus
Right.
line animals.
Right.
That's it.
And then there's also like Swiss line for blackheads, for example. Like
Right.
that's legitimate because it's a completely different bloodline coming from a different country.
Right. Now, as
You know?
soon as you start mixing different bloodlines, documented or undocumented, making a look, and then doing that multiple times over, that can technically then be called a line. It's just a mix of other lines, really. So yeah, it really does come down to who did it first. So to me, like, it's great to do something unique with a combination of lines or looks, but it has to be reproducible. You have to put in the time to do it multiple times, and somebody else has to be able to reproduce the same results.
Right.
So there's a lot to it. So, I think calling something somebody's line gets thrown around a little too loosely in the hobby without, like, some real substance behind it.
Agreed.
Let's see. Brandon Valentine asked, can you guys tell the difference between line and morph? Can you explain the difference? So, yeah. So, a morph is something that is genetically reproducible. Okay. Axanthic, caramel, albino, something that it has a definitive mode of inheritance, whether it be incomplete dominant, complete dominant, recessive, simple recessive, like all these different things. That's a morph. A morph can also be just a look that is polymorphic or polygenic because there are multiple genes that make up a look, and so you get a variable expression. It is still consistently reproducible based on the amount of blood from that lineage. So that's when a line constitutes a morph. So like the Balin tiger line is a morph. So a line can be a
hypo is also kind of in that middle ground a little bit.
Yeah, and morph is just a loose word to categorize a label for something that looks different and is reproducible. Like, you can physically reproduce that look. It's not just a fluke. So, but then, a line is also a look without necessarily being a morph too. If you think about,
Brisbane coastals.
Yeah, or M-Pen coastals. There's a look to them. They have a certain color tone and fish netting and zigzaggy dorsal pattern. And although it's not a morph like a Balin tiger, because although it does alter the appearance enough for you to notice it, it's not a morph. That's a line, because it's a line of a group of species. It's selectively bred for a trait that isn't necessarily a dramatic, like half the clutch looks like this, or some of them. They're all that one way or the other. So that's
very polygenic.
Extremely polygenic.
Yeah.
So when you selectively breed for a look, 9 times out of 10, you're making a line, unless it's morph related that's polygenic or includes other morphs and refining those morphs and getting the best example of them. That's when you have a morph that is also a line. But otherwise, a morph is something that sits on the DNA and has a mode of inheritance for the offspring and is reproducible by anybody with said animals involved in that project.
Right. The ivory jungle stuff is selective breeding, correct?
Yes.
Like that's so like that. If you take something like that took generation after generation after generation, picking the, I guess, whitest and blackest baby and continuing that, right? That's a line of selective.
That is a line. Yes.
Polygenic phenotype. And then the stonewash thing, you took 2 normal bredls and you bred them, and then half the clutch looked weird. That's a morph, because then you bred those back together and then everything looked weird because it's a recessive trait. It didn't take generation after generation after generation. That genetic mode of inheritance is so strong and predictable that you can just, bam, done. Stonewash. There you go.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because, as I'm saying that, Nick's line of ivory is a great example of a line that has been refined so much that it has such a dramatically different phenotype that it almost becomes a morph in itself. Because if you breed, an ivory to a normal jungle unrelated, the offspring will look different. but it's not like half of them are going to be white and black like the parents, and half of them are going to be normal. It's a blending of the two,
right?
And it's variable among the offspring, and it warrants the name because of the line that went into those offspring, but it's referred to differently. Instead of saying an ivory zebra when it's, you know, like a mix of an ivory and like a normal jungle, you would say a zebra with 50% ivory blood, to signify that although it looks different, it's not morph related, it's bloodline related. Line, if you think of line as the shorthand for bloodline, it makes it easier to conceptualize what goes into it. It's a bloodline, which means it's been selectively bred for a certain look over time and generations.
Right.
So that's the easiest.
I think it's important to remember that they are both genetically based, right? But for a line, we're talking about so many different genes that it takes a long time. And if you mix them, like you said, you're going to get a blend. You're not going to get like half the clutch is a stunning ivory and the other half is a normal jungle, right? Whereas if that's what you got, it's a morph, because there's only maybe one genetic locus at play, and it's a simple recessive or something of that nature that makes a huge difference just in that one location. But I can see where it gets confusing, because like there's crossover too, right? You talk about the tiger stuff. I can see how that gets confusing for folks that maybe are familiar with striping in other animals that is a simple recessive.
Right.
You know,
well, and then there's the Peterson stripe in coastals, which is another striped animal that has a similar look, but is different, distinguishable through the lineage, and is again not a morph, but a line that has a very distinct phenotype.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard to say that the Balin tiger isn't a morph because it has such a strong phenotypic variation that is reproducible, but because the mode of inheritance isn't so cut and dry, you know, incomplete dominant or recessive, you can kind of get all of it because it's multiple genes at play. It's hard to say it's just a morph. It's like it's both, but it doesn't warrant the label morph, because calling it a polygenic line, I think, is more respectful to those who put in the work, and to really explain how much work went into it. I think calling it a line, like creating a line, is much harder than creating a morph. And proving
it takes a lot longer.
Right. So I think, you know, not that it really matters, and not like any breeders are going to getting upset about it. You know, like Balin's not saying it's not a morph, it's a line. He's not like, you know, lighting pitchforks and going after people, but it does help to quantify them differently, and it does have an air of respect for the amount of work that went into that.
Agreed. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely.
A great polygenic line is something that's so refined and genetically strong it will breed true when put to a genetically different animal, in my opinion, such as certain pastel lines and boas, for example. Exactly. Yes. That's a great way to quantify and explain that. So yeah, that's where it comes from. That's the definition of it. And, you know, to dig into why it's important to keep track of that, lines have implications for purity in the history. And when you're talking about a gene pool that is limited and no new stuff is coming in, it's important to distinguish those lines so you can make sure that what you're doing is a responsible pairing, trying to make sure you're not inbreeding too far, although some species are, you know, totally fine with, you know, several generations of it before you see any detrimental effects. With some species, it is very crucial. And it's just kind of nice, you know, with a limited gene pool, everybody kind of has everything. So it's another way to add your creative thumbprint to a project by, you know, kind of experimenting with mixing some of it. And ultimately, we're all just keeping snakes in boxes. So do what you want.
And trying to do what the monkeys driving cars love to do, which is put labels on things.
Yeah. It has a lot to do with just being able to communicate with one another so we know what we're talking about, or the other knows what we're saying.
I do think it's really critical with some of the polygenic stuff to keep track of what's going on and be honest about it. There's like, it's such a tightrope with the hypo stuff with Brettles. Like if you have a 50%, you got to tell people it's a 50%, even if it looks like a 100%, you know, like it gets trickier because you have to keep track of that of that proportion stuff, almost more like the Superdwarf folks are doing, you know, like it matters.
It's good information. It does matter. And it is different from a lot of other niches within the reptile community. Like leopard gecko folks aren't paying attention to that. Crested gecko folks don't have to deal with that. You know, leaf tail gecko, you know, like there's all these examples where, you know, the species is the species, other than maybe some locality variation or island variation, you know.
It's the nature of the polygenic trait where like you can have a 50% hypo that didn't hit on any of those major alleles, and at that point you have no business calling it a hypo anymore. Like it's a normal brittle.
But
you can say it came from
to know that it came from that blood.
Yeah, exactly. You just, but it takes another level of communication and explaining. And somebody commented on one of my videos and asked, like, in theory, if you selectively bred your nicest 50% hypos, can you get 100% back? And I had to stop and think for a second, and the answer I think is no. You at that point you have selectively bred for reduced melanin, but does that make
the other stuff is in there? You can't get 100%. You can get 99.99 or how generations down.
You can make a really pretty 50% hypo is what you can do.
Yeah, or a really pretty 75 or 87.5 or 93. You know, you can go down that road and go down there, but once it's been diluted, it can't be made pure again.
Exactly. 100%.
You can't remove blood from a line. You can only add more.
I mean, even if you go so far with it that you even have something that looks better than some of the 100%, you still can't call it 100%.
Sure. It's just good. It's good for posterity purposes, preservation of information. And because, you know, the last thing you want is to get down the line where nobody paid attention to any of it and everything's just a Bredli or everything's just a jungler, or, you know, whatever. And then you have to start all over and you have no idea what things really are.
Oh, that would be fun.
That's why I take it so personally when newcomers into Morelia, the first thing they do is just breed the first 2 carpets they can get their hands on. And I get it, because if you don't know, you don't see the issues with it. But, you know, having spent so many years learning from other people and the people that came before us, how much work they put into preserving the unique identity of subspecies, species, things like that. You know, there are crosses and there are morphs out there, and that's an essential part of the hobby. But, you know, the other half of that coin is preserving this stuff, because ultimately Australia isn't letting anything go right now. So,
100%. And that's the learning curve for those new folks, right?
I think, you know, everybody has a responsibility to, if they're going to produce animals, do it in a responsible, thoughtful way. Not because there's anything wrong with making a cross, but because if you're going to do something, might as well do something that, you know, doesn't undo somebody else's work or adds more value to the community as a whole. Like more pure coastals, they don't have to be any fancy line, but it's better than adding coastal jungles or coastal Darwin crosses, because they essentially take away from the overall population gene pool that, you know, you could think of as preserving these animals in case something goes wrong in the wild, or who knows what. You know, we already saw how close some species came to being wiped out in Australia because of those fires.
And in the Ruffy episode of NPR recently, that really got me thinking, with cane toads marching their way into the Kimberley and Ruffy's eating toads and frogs. It's like, so
there's a lot of value in preserving these pure lines. Not that there isn't value in the cross and morph projects. It's just a different type of value, I think. So that's just me.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you for sure.
Yeah, Jeff says that reminds me of the Dumerals and Madagascar cross and morph market right now. I
know.
That's an example of when I do have a problem with it, because the mad grounds are not well established in the hobby. They hardly exist in any significant numbers, and so crossing them out with Dumerals is just an injustice, because ultimately, if those animals if that's the last production that female has, say she's the last of her line and she dies before you can actually ever produce more ground boas,
Right.
you eventually completely taken a chunk out of that population and impacted its survivability. Unless there's a huge, thriving, robust, abundant population of something like that, it's hard for me to say that that's okay to cross out until something's well established. I can't see any good in that.
I feel like there should always be a justification, a reason for producing living things. And
Even
I
if
don't know what the reason would be for that.
Yeah. Even if it's pure. I mean, pure stuff, like there should be a justification for.
You should at least know what you're doing, like what your goal is.
Yeah, no random homeowner should go get sulcatas and be like, I want to breed them, unless there's a demand for it, because certain species, there's just too many of them. They don't need any more. Like
Boland jungle cross.
Oh yeah, the Boland's jungle cross. That was another one. That one was really bad. Was not a fan of that. And that's ultimately why I have a huge problem with hybrids. I think hybrids are gross because, well, we've already said it, but at the same time, certain hybrids, whatever, they don't impact the population, like Carpondros, whatever. I don't care. Do your thing.
Jesus hates Carpondros.
Yeah. Carpondros. We got your back, Gary.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, it's interesting to see how other people kind of almost like narrow-mindedly or shallow just breed things because they're curious. I just, in certain instances, it's not the responsible thing to do. So,
agreed. I agree.
That's all I have to say on that one.
100%. They're living things. You're not just, doing an art project. Like we use the word hobby, but we probably shouldn't.
I have seen some discussion about that as well. I've seen discussion about referring to your animals as a collection and what that has to do sort of in how we mentally consider and think of things. Is there like merit to calling them family members or pets, even if you're breeding them? Like there's a lot of things like that. So
yeah, the terminology always struck me as odd. Hobby, right? Like when I think of hobby, I think of like crocheting or stamp collecting. But like these are living, breathing, significantly, unique animals. So it's an interesting choice. Interesting choice.
Yeah. So Brandon says, okay, hear me out. Ivory zebra to a diamond. Brandon, get out of here. I'm disappointed in you. Go put yourself in the shame corner. That was awful. No. The jungle diamond cross days of the 80s are over. No, that's just me. I'm just
let the past die.
Yeah.
Kill it if you have to.
Yeah. Nick would be upset if he heard you say that. Albino high percentage bred.
Nick's always upset.
Wanting to make. Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. The albino Bredli is a great example of a beautiful snake that is a complete species hybrid, but like,
but dude,
it looks good. Like, so do it. And it's the same thing with the ivory diamonds. I get it, making an ivory diamond, cross, whatever. But
see, that's an instance where you have a reason, you have a goal. I may not necessarily agree with it, but that's different. Like, what you're trying to do. So if that's your prerogative, then
for a look, go for it. Just know that I'm not going to buy one.
Exactly.
Don't you dare send one to me because I will have nothing to do with it other than get mad that it's taking up space here.
Like the Facebook picture. Oh, that's pretty. But no.
Yeah. So I get it. To each his own. We're just keeping snakes in boxes, but they're not for me. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
So is there anything you wanted to get out there or touch on before we maybe close out here?
Good question. I don't think so. I almost got bit by the falsie yesterday. Nobody tell Nipper. I mean, hey, I was being responsible. There was some stuck shed. We did a long soak, got it all off. I didn't get bit, but that was a zesty moment for me. Also got bit by a Brettles python because I didn't use the hook.
Yep.
And my Ruffy seems to only want live. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
that's my only things.
There you go. I found out that the Mandarin rat snake I got was a boy, and Chris Sharp hit me up. He's like, "It's female? I'm pretty sure I sexed it as a boy." And I was like, "Huh, I must have misremembered." And I go sex it. Sure enough, it's a boy. So,
Okay.
Apologies to Chris. Didn't mean to I just misremembered. So the Mandarin didn't want its second meal, but I think I gave it a second one too soon. So it ate the first one for me, so it's doing just fine.
Nice.
And no food goes to waste around here. So the Savannah Monitor got the unwanted mouse pinky when the Mandarin didn't want it. So
yeah. Yeah. And Jeff, we did discuss it first thing, but again, more USARK love.
Yep.
Definitely support.
Definitely go sign up to be a member if you aren't already. And at the very least, you can get on their newsletter list they sell, or they email out, not sell, and just stay informed on the current legislation that they're working on keeping from taking your rights away in all the various states.
Yep. There's always something you can do, even if finances are tight and you're not able to support financially. That doesn't mean you can't support. Post on social media. There's other ways to do it.
There's a new Instagram page for USARK, the official USARK Instagram page. So that'll probably be another good resource to get good live updates as things progress legislative wise. I'm sure that'll be another tool they add to their arsenal of keeping everybody informed. And one
thing we can all do that's free is just try to focus on the positive, represent what we're doing to others in a positive way. And just be a quote model citizen of the keeping community, if you will, at the moment.
I have an interesting story to kind of close that out that touches on exactly that. And why it's interesting is this friend of mine will remain nameless. But he was one of the individuals that was in the hobby in terms of Morelia and breeding and stuff before I was. And when I got to meet him through other friends, became very close friends with this guy, went to his wedding and everything. So he was a longtime keeper, and he's no longer in the hobby anymore. He might have a couple snakes at home, just for, because he loves them, but you won't see him on social media in reptile groups. You won't see him do any posts in the Morelia groups or anything. And without, getting into the specifics of what's been going on in the hobby lately on a public and global forum, he was telling me that it was interesting to see what's going on. And from his perspective, he is glad he is not a member of this community right now because of some of the things ongoing and how it portrays reptile keepers to folks outside of the, and that really, really hit home. Essentially somebody outside of the hobby said, "You guys look stupid right now, and I'm glad I'm not you." And that's, that's a fair perception. That's somebody's experience, and that's somebody who understands reptiles. Imagine how foolish somebody who doesn't understand the reptile community might perceive folks when we're divisive and fighting amongst ourselves in a public forum. So if you don't have the money to donate to USARK, or you don't have animals that you could, donate proceeds from sales of, or anything, at the very least, you can be just a good representative of the hobby. I mean, everything we do, people see in the lens of, well, who is this guy and what is he about? If you're a reptile guy and you're acting out, they're gonna be like, man, this reptile dude he's a goofball, or he's kind of obnoxious. And then they start seeing all reptile people through that lens. So,
100%.
We're a small community, even though we immerse ourselves amongst all these other reptile folks, and it feels like we're surrounded by reptile people everywhere, because, there's reptile people everywhere. But in the reality, we are a very, very, very small part of the global population. And there's a lot more people that would rather see our ability to keep reptiles be diminished entirely, especially with COVID and the results of, this disease spreading from wet markets of exotic places. We deal with exotic animals. It's very easy for somebody to put those two together, and think that we are a part of this problem that is global.
100%. And
so, yeah.
Look, if we can't respect each other, treat each other with respect, and have each other's back, we can't expect people outside of this to do that for us.
Sure.
That's
and be careful who you associate with. If you are perceived as being in the same circle of friends as somebody who is not being a good steward for the community, you don't have to join in. You can just, push that out of the way and stand alone. Even if, you think you're alone, there are other people out there that are like you, and just, don't fall prey to it. Don't be baited in, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. If you're out in any sort of public forum, whether it just be walking down the street, talking to your neighbors, and you're the reptile guy wearing the snake shirt, and they know that, they remember your actions and your behaviors. And it sucks to say, you have to care about what other people think of you, but that's the world we live in.
Absolutely.
Well, people care way too much, which is just a product of, human nature and everything being globalized and in our pockets. You can't avoid it. And so you don't have the right to just act a fool because you want to. You're representing everybody else. So just, we have to be conscious in the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. It's no different. It's just, we have to understand that everything is looked at through the microscope right now. And it's an ever-present privilege that we could lose like that if somebody, decides to, just make a legislative ban or something. There's all this stuff going on. And every time I get onto this little soapbox, I feel like a broken record. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. But it's so true, and I see it so often to this day that people are just not keeping that in perspective. And I'm not perfect. I have definitely lost perspective and said and done things that didn't benefit the hobby or myself, or had no real end game. And that's why I don't have Facebook on my phone. That's why I just try to stay out of groups, because we're all human, and find something funny and it might be a little bit offensive. Sure. Or whatever. And we just share it and don't really think about it. But, recent events has made it really clear that we're all in this together. We all represent the reptile keepers of the world as a global community, and we can do better. So.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. My friend, Riley Jimson. You are the man.
I am a man.
It is always a highlight of my week speaking to you, sir.
You got me twice.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know how you put up. I don't know how you put up with me, man.
No, that was a lot of fun, though. It was great. It was great visiting you again, and that there's so much cool stuff to see in addition to just good hanging. So that was cool.
Yeah, keep your camera rolling. I want to see what's going on with your stuff too, and I'll keep you posted on blackhead egg development and all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
Did you want to throw your anything out there, or throw your stuff out there? Or?
Sure. So just real quick, of course, Morelia Python Radio Network. If you are watching this, you're on the YouTube channel, make sure that you have subscribed. Give the video a like if you feel so inclined. You can follow the network on Instagram and whatnot. Support the various podcasts that we have going. Should we list them, or should we? Should we go there? I didn't make the list like Eric.
We can try. Try.
Student of the Serpent, Carpets and Coffee, Carpet Cliff Notes, Collywood Corner, the OG Morelia Python Radio,
Field Herping
Podcast incoming. And then there's other, like,
there's a couple more.
Herp History and stuff is on the original feed. What I missed?
No, that's all 7 of them that are up and out there right now. That's the lineup. I went back and finished the live stream with Eric and Owen, and I paid attention to that part at the end, because I was like, I wonder if he's going to get them all.
Yeah, that was my first time trying.
Yeah, it's not easy, especially when you're like, oh crap, I didn't write this down.
Exactly.
And then Eric again is taking a rest. He's being affected by the cold more than some of us, so he's taking a breather. So we've taken the reins for him. And then don't forget, What? Oh, your horseback riding. Yeah. Don't forget to if you like the past 9+ years of what Eric and Owen have done for Morelia Python Radio and the community, don't forget to go support them on Patreon. Again, as Lucas said, subscribe to this YouTube channel, share it around. Let's help it grow. And then that way, this effort that they put forth, managing 7 podcasts plus 9 years of their original podcast, plus the Teespring store, NPR network, all this stuff. You can
Facebook
vote.
Community pages, Carpet Fest.
You can, gosh, yes, Carpet Fest. Holy cow, COVID ruined that temporarily. But man, they have done a lot, and you can support them even if you can't make it to Carpet Fest, even if you can't catch shows live. You can buy some merch. You can become a patron for just $5. You can help. I mean, some of you are probably like, well, you guys are involved, so you're benefiting from it. But we're not taking anything out of this. This is all just because Eric and Owen have done so much, and they kind of came into the fundraising side of this kicking and screaming. They didn't want to do it because they're too good for us, and so I took the evil upon myself. So yeah, we just, they deserve any sort of gratitude, and the more fundraising.
It's all going back into the content. It's all going back into the show, herping trips, things like that. Which
new equipment. Eric's upgrading his microphone. Owen's taking care of good stuff, and so it's all going back. You're not
actually buying us coffee.
No. We buy our own coffee. This money is just a gesture to help support what they've done and to keep them going, because it is a huge time commitment, and their significant others allow them to step away so frequently to record and do these things. It's the least we can do. So
absolutely.
With that being said, Lucas, did you want to throw out your personal stuff?
Yes. You can find me on all the thingies, Centralian Exotics, centralianexotics.com.
Go buy a Chondro hoodie.
Oh yeah, I made some stuff on Teespring if you want to check those out. I actually got some. They're not in this room, so I can't show them off, but they came out great. I can say they look good.
Nice. One day I'll get off my butt and redo my shirts and get those back in order. I need to do that.
Sure. Your logo's badass, man. I'll buy one.
I just need to figure out how to make that logo in a higher resolution digital file so I can stretch it. But yeah.
All right, throw out your stuff.
And then you can find me on YouTube just under Riley Jimison. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook under Riley's Reptiles. Don't forget to check out Colubrid Corner. I think that's it.
Excellent. Well, man, thanks everybody. This was a great time. And I hope everybody has a good week. We'll see you next time. Enjoy some coffee and Morelia Monday. Yes, exactly. All right, bud. Have a great day. All right. Adios. Later.